Okay, hi everyone, we're back on Front Up. I have Ernie Steinauer with us today. He's the director of the Nantucket Sanctuary for Mass Audubon, and we're going to talk about invasive plant species today. Welcome, Ernie.
Thank you, good to be here.
First of all, what are invasives? Can we define those somehow? How are they different from exotics? How does it all fit in?
Let's start with exotic. Exotic means it's from somewhere else.
Right.
So usually that means overseas. A lot of our exotics are Eurasian, similar climate, so they do well here.
Yeah.
So anything from somewhere else is exotic. Now that could even include from a different part of North America.
Right.
So
especially if you're in an island like Nantucket.
Especially, yeah, and we're a very special case because we have things that aren't found here that are found on the Cape, for example,
right,
that might be exotic here. Now invasive is really refers to how these plants behave once they're brought to a place, or even if they're just here naturally, they can be invasive. And what that means is they get into an area, spread rapidly, consume more and more of the space, and eventually become, sort of the dominance in the system, or play an important role in a portion of the system. Like they might dominate the forest floor, for example, and then you'd still have all the trees overhead, at least for the time being, but they might displace all the forest floor community.
But they squeeze out native species? They
basically outcompete, or through some other mechanism remove the native species, and then you could just start listing all the other effects that they might have. But that's sort of the critical thing, is they become the dominant organisms, and sometimes they become a monoculture. Like you look at the patches of Phragmites on the pond shores, and that's all you see there.
Right, so the Phragmites are the reeds that are displacing our native plants.
They tend to occupy areas that were formerly cattail marshes, things like that. But any kind of pond shore, they'll just take over whatever might have been there, and over time they'll eliminate that other plant material.
So invasives, do they upset the sort of natural balance and bring other pests or diseases or eco sort of systems with them, say?
Well, they upset the balance in that if you look at our native plants, there's usually a suite of herbivores, pollinators, fungal associates. The whole ecosystem, plant community, animal communities are kind of built around each other to some. Now these are very flexible systems, of course, but native plants have been shown to support more insects, of different varieties, more pollinators. Often they'll provide nesting habitat for birds and things like that sometimes the exotics don't. So you do see a loss of biodiversity of a whole range of communities, not just the plants that they're displacing. So it has impacts across the whole scale of the natural system.
Right.
And they can even change the chemical composition of soil. They can do all kinds of things. They can some in cases it's really profound.
So now what are some of the common invasives here that I know that you and other groups on the island are working to eradicate and control some kinds of invasives in some ways, right? Right,
and there are a lot, and we have a group called the Nantucket Biodiversity Initiative, and then we have a committee in there, that's the Invasive Plant Species Committee, and we've come up with a list of the common to not quite so common. And if you go to the Nantucket Biodiversity Initiative website, we have a list that sort of ranks them in importance.
Okay, so could you give us that address?
I don't know the URL, but if you just Google Nantucket Biodiversity Initiative, it'll go there. And it's really nice. Cheryl Beaton put together a key, so you can actually go through and key out things, and nice
so that would
pictures.
definitely be worth checking out.
It's a great resource.
So what are some of the, I know that there's a site that everyone will be familiar with, which is right next to Nantucket Office Products, that you guys have been working on.
Working on for a number of years. And that's Japanese knotweed is the primary target there. That's probably one of the top 3 of the worst ones on the island. And the reason that one is so bad is because it spreads into all kinds of habitats, and you just find it all over the place. It's not only restricted to roadsides or disturbed areas, but it's in a lot of wetland margins and things.
It's a very successful plant.
It's very successful, very difficult to get rid of.
Doesn't it propagate itself in
It
different
spreads
ways?
both sexually and asexually. It produces flowers and fruits like most flowering plants do.
Right.
But then it also spreads by underground rhizomes, underground stems. And they can just be in very short distances, so you see those nice little tight patches, but then it can go 20, 30 feet.
Amazing.
Go underneath the road, come up on the other side.
Right.
The real terror of this plant is it persists in like spoils piles. So you see it along roads like, well, the classic example is the pulpous bike path. You see all those patches of knotweed. That's because they dug up a patch, put it in a spoils pile. All those fragments, they spread out along the bike path, and now there's many patches. So sometimes they spread naturally, but a lot of times they're spread with human assistance.
Okay, that was one point I was going to make. Maybe we'll touch on that now, is that how do people need to guard against where they dump their plant material waste?
That's very critical. And a really distressing habit we see is people dumping landscape debris in the moors. And most of the time that stuff's not full of invasives, but when it is, you can bring that stuff into new habitat. What we recommend is that any landscape debris that has invasive plant parts should go into either, if it's a small amount, you can bag it and put it in the household trash bin at the dump. If you have a large amount, talk to the person at the gate and they'll direct you to the composter, the digester dump spot, and you can dump it in there. And if you want, I'll just go into this real quickly. That Emily Molden or McKinnon and Sarah Oaktie and I have been studying if that digester is hot enough to kill seeds and rhizomes. And we haven't done every invasive species on the island, but of the 10 we've done, the digester should be hot enough to kill the seeds. And we're working now on roots and rhizomes, and it's looking pretty good for that too. So that seems to be a safe way.
Important, because the compost that you then get from the dump, you do not want to be bringing to your house with seeds in it. But
the dump, the people out there mix compost from the other landscape debris piles in, which have not gone through the digester, and they can be contaminated with invasive plant seeds. And so people have complained about that.
We still have issues with that.
But they're working on it. They're putting in a good faith effort to resolve the problem.
That's good. Now, just one question I've always had, and some other people out there probably have too, the burning that is done by various different organizations on the island.
Yeah, mostly Mass Audubon, the Land Bank,
the reasons behind it for us?
It's not for sort of the invasive exotic plants. It's to maintain rare, important plant habitats that are native plant communities, mostly from changes associated with other native plants. If you look at the moors, it's a huge sea of scrub oak. 50, 60 years ago, scrub oak wasn't very common out there. The burning helps retard the invasion of the shrubs, can reverse the invasion of the shrubs and things like that. Helps maintain the grasses and the heath vegetation, things like that.
Now, just quickly before we have to finish, how can people help? We've already talked about not dumping plant material in the moors. How about what they are planting in their own gardens?
Well, fortunately, a couple of years ago, Massachusetts banned the sale of most of the really major exotic dangerous invasive exotic plants. You still see them around, and if you have them in your yard, it'd be great if you remove them. And that does often take expertise, but your landscapers should know how to do that. If you have questions, you can talk to your landscaper. Check out the biodiversity website. I think you could call members of the group, myself, Emily McKinnon at the Land Council. We
and get
can
some
point you.
advice.
The Conservation Commission might be of concern, especially if it's a wetland.
Right.
They should be contacted.
Yeah.
So, and they have a lot of information there as well.
Okay. Good. Well, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that will help everyone out there, and good luck with your projects. I'm sure you have a lot going on, and
many efforts over many years.
Right.
It's often not, that's something people should keep in mind, is it's not you go out there and treat it once
No.
and it's gone. It's usually multiple years.
What about people who want to volunteer? Do you use volunteers from the public for that kind of thing?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we've got several events where we're going to be doing removal projects, and boy, I wish I knew the dates. But again, the
They can find out.
Biodiversity Initiative, or
Okay.
we have a group called Nantucket Family Adventures, who's we're doing a removal project at the old mill.
Right, yeah. Mustard?
Garlic mustard.
Garlic mustard, okay.
And but we're also doing several invasive species walks this summer. They'll be in the paper, that just to help educate people
Good idea.
at some of the infamous sites around the island,
Right.
and things like that. They could join the conservation groups and support us,
Yeah.
and that's it's not always an inexpensive endeavor to remove these things,
Right.
and so
So any
support is
kind of
helpful.
Support and volunteer help
Volunteer
out.
help is great, and there's a lot of very simple things that don't require any kind of technical expertise, and a lot of it is non-chemical manual removal, things like that very
Right.
kids can help. I mean,
Right.
we have grade school kids out there, so it's a family fun time.
Great. Thank you very much for coming today, Ernie.
Well, thanks for having me.